Hi, my name is Ramon, and today I want to do just a quick test prep for those of you that are thinking about taking either your New York, Jersey, Connecticut, as well as your Pennsylvania real estate salesperson exam. These are the most common terms that you will see across probably the majority of the real estate exams across the US. Um, each state is going to have between 10 to maybe 15% of their own terminology that just pertains to their particular state. So hopefully those of you that's thinking about getting your license, as well as those of you that are maybe you received your license and now you need a refresher. So hopefully this will be efficient. All right, so let's get started. The first thing I want to talk about is strategy, only because of the fact that a lot of times you can know the answer, but you may not know the question. So let me explain. So a lot of times you may have studied hard, you know the material. Those of you that's going to school of taking any sort of class, you know that a lot of times you can over prepare and read too much into the question. The reason why I'm going to talk about strategy first, and as you can see here, again, for those of you in New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, Pennsylvania, and I will do a separate video for those of you that's in California. A lot of these states, they don't have no reciprocity like New York, New Jersey, California. So the exams, you can't just, and reciprocity means basically there's an agreement between the states so that you are exempt from needing this pre-licensing as well as taking the state exam. So with that in mind, that's the reason why I'm going to do a separate prep exam for California. But again, a lot of the terminology is pretty much going to be covered today. All right. Going back to strategy is always trying to figure out what the question is asking you, right? So of course you want to show up early, right? Because it's also physiological. A lot of people, for whatever reason, they have this fear of taking exams, right? So by showing up early, that's going to help with your blood pressure, with your breathing, all that other stuff. And believe it or not, again, you can know the information and still not perform well. There are a lot of individuals that's out there that's like that. So again, just don't bypass. I think this is probably the most important slide because a lot of times, and I'm quite sure some of you guys have experienced this, where you take an exam, you didn't prepare as well, but this strategy that I'm about to show you helped you squeak by with the passing grade, right? So you need to read the question twice, right? That's super important to read the question twice because a lot of times you may think you know the answer, but then they trick you, and that's and the job of the state is basically to have those four choices, right? Because most of them are going to be multiple choices across the country. And I've taken 5 of them. So I'm currently licensed in California, New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Connecticut, and soon to be Florida. So I'm preparing myself to take my next exam. I've already finished the pre-licensing requirements because again, Florida does not have any reciprocity with any of the states that I've already had my license. So basically I have to go through the whole pre-licensing like everybody else. But with that being said, a lot of times you want to jump on the question, right? You're like, oh, I already know, right? Sometimes you don't even read the full question because you're like, oh, I already know where they're going with this. And I want you to practice just breathing, right? And that's another reason why it's important to show up early, get your breathing going, make sure that you're relaxed. I know a lot of you guys, if you take an exam in the morning, you're probably gonna have some coffee. I would recommend drinking coffee afterwards, especially if you have a weak bladder, because most of these exams are at least 3 hours long. If you're nervous, you're gonna wanna use the restroom. The other thing too is that when you read the question more than once, now you give yourself an opportunity to see something that you didn't see before. But if you're rushing across it and you're just trying to rush on to the next question, a lot of times you may miss what they're asking, So it's important to me, it's actually more important to understand what they're asking, because then once you understand the question, you should be able to eliminate at least two of the choices. It should jump out at you where there's at least one of these is obviously wrong. Now, instead of it being 1 out of 4, now it's 2 out of 3, right? And you hopefully want to get to the 50-50 chance, right? So it's important, again, take your time, read through the questions 2 times, try to avoid having coffee, obviously have some sleep before your exam. If you have the choice of choosing your exam, either a morning exam or afternoon exam, I would choose the afternoon exam. Why? Because in the morning, you're dealing with rush hour. No matter what city you're in the morning, you're going to be dealing with rush hour. You're going to be dealing with transportation. You're going to be dealing with a whole lot of things that's going on. Everybody's rushing to get to work. And if you have a bad situation or the traffic or what have you, you could be thinking about that there. But if you choose like an afternoon slot, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock or later, right, the rush is gone. Not only have you given yourself more opportunity to get some more rest, you can look at your notes again real quick before you sit down for the exam. So if you can choose an afternoon slot, I probably should have put that on the slide, but I'm glad I remembered it right now. All right, so let's start. Let's begin. A sales person versus broker. So again, most of what I'm saying is going to pertain to New York and New Jersey as far as the requirements. So for example, to the pre-licensing requirements for salesperson just increased from 75 to 77. So now you need 77 hours for the salesperson and 152 hours for the broker. All right. Another difference between the two is that with a salesperson, you need to be 18 years of age. So you'll be in high school and get your real estate license. Okay. The broker, on the other hand, needs to be at least 20 years old. One of the other requirements that the broker has is they want the broker to have at least 2 years of experience. So an easy way for you to retain and remember the 20, because I know a lot of us want to think about 21, right? Because we're thinking about drinking and going to clubs and stuff like that. But just remember that you need 2 years experience. So in addition to being 20, they want you to have 2 years experience. So they're assuming that if you were to get your salesperson's license at 18, now you have 2 years experience. So now you need to be 20 years of age. Okay, so hopefully that helps. If you have a law degree, so it's not just having a law degree. In addition to having a law degree, you need to be part of the bar. So that's the reason why I put on here Bar Association. So just because you're an attorney, you're not exempt. And again, this only pertains to the broker's license. So you're exempt from meeting any other pre-licensing requirements, as well as taking the school exam and state exam like everyone else, if you are a part of the bar. So whichever state that you are trying to acquire your real estate broker's license, and you agree that you're not going to hire any agents. So that's the other stipulation. So if you know that you want to open up a brokerage, that you want to hire salespersons, then now you're going to have to go through the same pre-licensing requirements of 152 hours, right? 2 years experience or 3 years equivalent experience. What they mean by the equivalent, all the different fields that's relating to real estate. That could be mortgage, that could be construction, property management, anything that's relating to real estate. Okay. So NOI has to deal with net operating income. So again, this exam, and I know that this might be a shock to a lot of folks, the exam is not structured to really teach you real estate. It's more about teaching you what not to do, right? Because the reason why we have to get a license is because of the fact, and the reason why you have 77 hours, right, for a salesperson, 152 for a broker, is because they want to minimize the lawsuits. So the state believes that by making sure that there's more training, right? And remember, we're not the only industry where it's required to have a license, right? If you want to be a nurse, right? You go to nursing school, you still have to sit for your boards, right? Same thing with an attorney. You're an attorney, you go to law school, you still have to pass that bar, right? So, in addition to passing your school exam after you finish your 77 hours, you will need to pass the state exam. Why? Because now the state gets to measure, right, the type of training that you receive from the school that you chose to go to, right? And you guys in the comments, if you need me to recommend a school for you, just ask me in the comments. But net operating income is more of a commercial term. So again, a lot of these terms, they're going to be with different aspects of real estate. So this is going to be pertaining more to commercial real estate. So unless you're working with a client that's purchasing like a multifamily or commercial property, you really don't need to know about net operating income, right? So if your client is purchasing a townhouse, a single family house, a condo, co-op, the net operating income is not going to come up. But this, again, the exam wants to give you a broad stroke, but they're only giving you just a sample of all the different areas, mortgages, commercial real estate, all the other areas. I say that and stress that after you get your license, you're still not going to know real estate. That's the job of your broker. But here on this channel, we're going to deal with all the different topics. This is basically just the foundation, just so that you can get your license. But all the other topics, investing, we're going to get more and more into net operating income, NOI, which basically means just like when you receive your paycheck, you have a net amount, you have the gross on there, but then you have the net amount. So if I'm an investor, which I am, a New York City investor, and I purchase a 4-family, that 4-family, let's say, is generating $15,000 per month. So then you multiply that by 12, that's $180,000 a year. And let's say my expenses are with insurance, debt to income, which we're going to talk about, principal and interest, as well as other expenses, insurance and stuff like that. Let's say that comes to $50,000, right? After I pay property taxes and all those things, right? So I have $130,000 net. So that will be my net operating income. Okay. Again, any other questions, you can just leave it in the comments. Easement right away. So when you purchase a property, unless it's in a condo, co-op, or a townhouse, you don't have to worry about an easement or right away, but an easement is going to pertain to a single family house. It could pertain to a multi-family house if they have a driveway, but easement is just, you have your property line and then you have access, right? So it could be access to a driveway, it could be access to a property. So that's what they mean by easement. So just remember for the exam, right of way. A CO, when you purchase the property, especially an investment property, you need to have a certificate of occupancy. And if it's new construction, so if your client has purchased a brand new condo, you would have to wait for either a TCO, which is a temporary certificate of occupancy, or a certificate of occupancy in order for you to receive your commission. Again, the city or the county has to send inspectors to the property or to your resident, right? So let's say you are an investor and you find a property, you renovate the property, and once you start that renovation, now you have to bring it up to code. Meaning, if I purchased a brownstone that was built in the early 1900s, right? Or late 1800s, right? Like 1890. Now, I need to make sure that the proper electrical, proper plumbing, all those things that needs to be updated, and they're going to send an inspector to make sure that the work was done properly, right? Because again, the job of the building department is to protect, is for health and safety. You want to make sure that when I move my tenants there, that they're not in a situation that could be detrimental to their health or kill them. A CO is a certificate of occupancy. BTU, so BTU is British thermal units. So when you go shopping for an AC has a certain amount of BTUs coming out of it based upon the size of the room. So when you go to Home Depot, to Lowe's, they will ask you, what's the size of the room? Is it 800 square feet, 600 square feet? Because that would determine the BTUs. Another thing that's going to determine how many BTUs is going to be the window well that you're going to place that AC unit in. Because obviously, obviously you're going to have your windows, so you have to get a unit that can fit in there. And a lot of times your landlord will let you know if you just reach out to them, let them know that you want to purchase one. If they allow it, they'll let you know what size. And if it's your property, you purchase it, it's your home, then you could just have a professional to help you, because those units, they're very heavy unless you're in an apartment, okay? But that's what BTU, so for example, remember that. Encroachment. So unlike easement, encroachment is, again, going back to the property line. So encroachment is because we have this property line that divides the lots, right? So every property, whether it's a single family house, 2 family, 3 family, 4 family, a building, sits on a lot. Once you cross that lot onto somebody else's property, now that is encroachment, right? So properties that are close to each other, sometimes they will have a fence. So if there's something that's hanging over, and your textbook will have examples like leaves or antennas or something that's hanging over to your neighbor's property, that is encroachment. EIS stands for Environmental Impact Statement. So me as a developer, I want to develop a piece of land that's never had a structure. So now the EIS, which is connected, of course, with the EPA, right, deals with the environment. So they want to make sure of the impact that my particular project is going to have on the community, right? Because if I'm building, let's say I'm building a 30-floor apartment building, there's going to be more stress on the subway system, the bus system. So they need to do an environmental impact statement. And again, they work with the EPA, right, which is the federal agency, right? And they need to determine how much stress is going to be placed on the existing infrastructure, right? Sewage, like I said before, transportation, the school system, the hospitals, right? Everyone in that area, in that circumference, right, that's near that project is going to be impacted. So that's what's called an environmental impact statement, because yes, there's going to be some impact when I have 20 floors, and let's say each floor has 10 apartments, right? So that's 200 units, right? And we know that each unit is not going to just have one person move in it, right? It's not going to be all studios. They need to create a statement to see how this is going to impact the environment, all right? Blockbusting. So blockbusting is a tactic where you are knocking on sellers. So this only pertains to sellers. And that's the thing I want you to remember for the exam. This only pertains to you're trying to get a listing. So you're trying to get listings. So you're going into certain neighborhoods and you're knocking on the door and you're saying that a certain protected group is moving into the neighborhood and that they should sell, right? They should allow you to sell their property because this particular protected group, and what I mean by protected group, race, religion, national origin, obviously sexuality, sexual whatever their status is, there's a lot of protected classes, again, that you will learn. We're going to cover some of those here in this presentation. That is blockbusting. You are trying to panic the sellers to sell, not because they want to, but because of you trying to incite that a particular group that you believe they're not going to want in their neighborhood. So it's called blockbusting. So it's illegal. All right. License renewal. So whether you're a salesperson or broker, New York, 22.5 hours. And it's going to cover, of course, fair housing. Pretty much the reason why we have the 22.5, and it's every year. So with most states. So remember, I'm licensed in 5 states: California, New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, Pennsylvania. Only California, I renew my license every 4 years. All the other states. So again, for the rest of you guys, that's in New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, Pennsylvania. And I would say the majority of the country is going to be every 2 years. So you're going to have to do your renewal of your license. For New York, it's 22.5 hours. They'll talk about updated issues. They're also going to go over any fair housing. That's mostly what they talk about, okay? Life estate. So a life estate is I leave a property to somebody, but I don't allow them to inherit the property. So they can use the property as if it's their own, but they can't sell the property. When they pass, that's i.e. life estate, then that property will go back to my estate. And of course, I will have this all arranged, right, while I'm still here on earth. And again, I will allow the person, whoever I choose, a nephew, cousin, relative, to occupy the property. They can even take a loan out on the property. But the only thing they can't do is sell the property, right? Because in order for that to happen, I would have to have them to inherit the property where they're able to acquire a deed. A life estate, you're not going to acquire a deed. So basically, you're still like a renter, just a little bit above a renter, only because you don't have to worry about rent increases and all those other stuff. And again, you can stay there for the rest of your life. And more than likely in this life estate, the person is not paying any rent or anything like that. CMA. So you see here in parentheses, I have that is not an appraisal. I started my career in 2007 working foreclosures. And one of the first things I had to learn how to do was this thing called the BPO, Broker's Price Opinion, right? So it's like a semi-appraisal. And I remember when I used to hand in the report into the lenders, and they will always be like, yeah, it's not a CMA. So you as an agent would do a CMA, which stands for comparative market analysis. So what are you comparing? You're comparing single family homes. You're comparing 3 bedrooms to another 3 bedrooms. You're comparing condos to condos. And the difference is it's on the market. So what I used to do when I did BPOs, because there were short sales or bank-owned properties, when I used to sell for Bank of America and Chase, basically, I'm also looking at properties that sold. And you can do that in your CMA as well. But again, the reason why it's not an appraisal is because in order for it to be an appraisal, you have to have an appraiser's license, right? So that's the reason why it's a CMA. And the exam will try to trick you, but just remember, you're licensed to be a real estate agent. So you can't be doing mortgages, you can't be doing appraisals, you can't be doing home inspections, right? Unless you're licensed in that particular field, all right? So I always like to tell new agents, just make sure you stay in your lane, right? Your broker will thank me because you don't want to open yourself up to liability by answering questions or doing something that you're not. So anytime I have a client that asks me a mortgage question, a home inspection question or construction question, an attorney question, I always go, oh, you know what? That's a great question. Do you have a broker, a lawyer an attorney that you're working with? Oh, do you have a mortgage broker that you're working with? If not, I will recommend one to you. Even if I know the answer, I may know what the interest rates are currently for a mortgage and be able to tell my clients what the payments are. But I know that I'm not licensed to give out that information. So even though I may know, again, Clients will respect you more by making sure you give them accurate information, right? And your broker will love you because you're not out there operating in a field that you're not covered, you're not licensed. So if later on your client said, you told me this and you told me that, and you go to court, it's going to be hard to explain that even though I'm not licensed, I still know, yeah, you may, but until you get that license, okay? All right. Commingling versus conversion. So with commingling is, and this is something that I hope if you decide to get your license, and again, through this channel, you're going to see that a lot of the topics is going to be investment related, because I feel like if you're going to take the time to get your real estate license, then you should try to prepare to be a millionaire. There was a time where getting 6 figures, that was a goal when I got it in 2007, but your goals shouldn't be 6 figures by now. No, you should be trying to get 7 figures by now. So with that being said, when you get your license, but again, you don't have to get your license. Most investors that are making a lot of money, they do not have a real estate license. But there are some benefits in having a license that I will talk about at the end of the video. Commingling is you got your license and you set up a company. You should never receive a commission check in your name. You should have your broker to wire you or cut you a check in your business name, right? So you should have your personal account, business account. Why? Because by having that proper structure, now you can, again, I'm not I'm not a licensed financial agent or advisor. So this is just for entertainment purposes. So you see how there, I just took care of the liability, right? After I just told you guys to stay in your lane, and here I am veering a little bit off into another lane. But one of the things as a new agent is that you want to have the checks go into your business name so that you can have more write-offs. Okay, again, not a CPA. You can talk to your CPA or your financial advisor about the information that I'm giving you. But again, for entertainment purposes, you should not be receiving your commission check in your name. It should be in your business name. So that way, when you have expenses, marketing, everything related to being an agent, now you can legally justify writing off those expenses. It's going to be hard to be able to separate the two if you only have a personal account. And in order for you to get a business account, you have to set up a business. And that's where commingling comes in at, where let's say you're working for an investor, you work up for me, and you close the deal for me, you got a check, or I give you a deposit. Let's say I give you 20%. It's $1 million property. I give you 20%, right? 20% of $1 million, 200,000. You take the 200,000, and instead of you depositing that check in your business account, right? So that later on, when you place the offer for me, you can just go ahead and write a check. You place that 200,000 in your personal account, right? Or if you're my property manager, any checks that I give you on the behalf of my property, right? Maybe it's to purchase supplies. That money should be going into a business account. If you're a property manager, you should have a separate escrow account, right? Or even an agent. Most brokers across the country are required to have escrow accounts, all right? So commingling is the mixing of personal and commercial funds, all right? Now, conversion is worse, because at least with commingling, if you transfer some funds over to your personal account, which I don't recommend you do, you can at least transfer those funds back. But with conversion, you spent those funds. In other words, you took my deposit and you went ahead and went to Vegas, right? Trying to see if you could double your money. So that's the huge difference. But both are illegal. So you don't want to commingle. You definitely don't want to do conversion, because conversion is you're using the funds for something other than, meaning you're spending the fund. You just spent the fund for something that was not its intended purpose. Okay. Les pendants, that's a lawsuit. When you purchase a property, the reason why we have escrow, the reason why we have attorneys in New York and parts of Jersey, especially Hudson County, Essex County of Jersey, is because of the fact that they're going to do a title search. They're going to search to make sure that the new buyer does not have to worry about any liens on the property, right? That the previous owner are responsible for. So lis pendens is a pending litigation. Let's say the original owner, the seller, has some remodeling done because they knew that they were about to place the property on the market. They went ahead, they hired a contractor, and that contractor later on put a lien on the property because the seller did not finish paying the contractor. Okay. Now you have a pending litigation, and that's important. You want to make sure we know about all the different liens, pending litigation before we close the deal. And now the new buyer, which had nothing to do with it, is now being held accountable. Okay. So another thing with your exams, there's always going to be two ways to say the same thing. So grantor is the seller, and the reason why, and grantee is the buyer. Now, the reason why you have this terminology is because on the deed, it's not going to say necessarily seller or buyer, right? It's going to say grantor and grantee. So that's the reason why the state want to make sure that you, again, are aware of this. So on the deed, it's going to show you grantor, grantee. All right. So just remember that there's a lot of terms that end with OR and EE. Grantor, assignor, mortgagor. So just know there's 5 or 6 different terms that you need to learn that ends with OR and EE. All right. Civil Rights Act of 1866. Now, this one pretty much you always going to see on your exam because it was the first Civil Rights Act, as you can see, of 1866 that dealt with trying to deal with the race relations, because again, the year before you had the Emancipation Proclamation. So a lot of the country was not aware that was passed, right? That's the reason why we have Juneteenth and stuff like that. This Civil Rights Act of 1866, and there's others. So just be aware that this one deals with race. And then what's going to happen is all the other groups, all the other marginalized groups are going to have their laws passed. Women, disabilities. So all the other groups that feel like they've been disenfranchised, now they are fighting to have laws passed for them as well. Okay. But the first one had to deal with race. So 1866. So just remember that. Redlining. Speaking about race, redlining. So back in the days, the lenders was not freely lending out to everybody. So based upon the zip code that you were purchasing in, they would have these big, huge maps in their office, and they would draw a red line around particular zip codes that they would not lend to. So don't know where you're going to purchase that property. The community had to get together, had to raise the funds. That's the reason why back in the days in Tulsa, we had Black Wall Street. So it was about pulling the funds together of African Americans in order to purchase. Why? Because of the fact that the lenders were not lending to us, right? That's what redlining is. Of course, it's illegal. Lenders, if they get caught doing that, it's a huge lawsuit. Avulsion. Avulsion has to deal with loss. So it's, let's say it's a piece of land, and it's near the beach. And the beach, the waves go in, come out, go in, come out. It starts tearing at the land right? And it's making it smaller and smaller. So that's avulsion, right? It's loss. All right, umbrella policy. Umbrella policy is going to be property insurance that covers up to $500,000, 500,000, right? But for whatever reason, maybe your property is worth $1 million. You decide that you want to get more insurance, additional insurance to your primary insurance. But what would happen is, God forbid you lose a lawsuit, let's say $1 million. So your primary insurance that's capped at 500,000, that would be exhausted. Then this umbrella policy would then kick in because it's in excess. This umbrella policy would then let, God forbid again, you get sued for, let's say, 750,000, right? And you were found negligent for whatever reason. So your primary coverage will cover the first 500,000, and then your umbrella policy will take care of the remainder. So your umbrella policy would then cover the 250,000, which is the balance. So for exam purposes, umbrella policy is excess insurance on top of the insurance that you already have. Okay? All right, leasehold versus fee simple. Okay, so for the exam, what I want you to remember is that the word leasehold has lease in there. So when you think of a lease, right, most of us have rented before in our lifetime. Maybe some of us are still renting, right, especially if you live in New York, right, where 72% of New York residents are renters. The lease is going to pertain to renters, but it's also going to pertain to co-op owners, right? Because of the fact that, and I don't know if you know this, but about 82% of the available inventory in New York City are co-ops, right? I'll create a separate video to go more and more in depth on co-ops because I know it's more of a New York thing than anything else. Remember, I'm licensed in 5 states, started my career in California, and I would always have people come to me and say, what is a co-op? What is a co-op? So I believe the whole state of California only has 3 buildings that you can assume title as a co-op. And one of those buildings happened to be in the city where I started my career, which is Long Beach, California. So again, leasehold is only going to be 2 types of properties. It's going to be renters. So when you move into your apartment building, a lot of times the management, either they would tell you verbally or they would just have it part of the welcome package for you to get additional insurance. And they call it renter's insurance, right? Because again, the contents that's inside of your unit, you're responsible for. Even if it's a leak from upstairs or next door, the building is not responsible. They're responsible to stop the leak, right? But they're not responsible to replace your personal items. So that's the reason why, as part of your lease, and sometimes I have you to acknowledge that they are requiring you to get renter's insurance. So that's going to be leasehold. Be simple, you own, meaning you're able to leave it in the will. So that's going to be condos, of course, single family, multifamily, commercial. All that is going to be fee simple, meaning that someone can leave property in their will. Unlike, obviously, if you're a renter, you can't leave your apartment in your will, as well as in a co-op. In a co-op, you're able to leave your shares of stock. You still have to get permission from the board if you want to possess the property. If you want to move in there, they can have you still go through the same process of interviewing and everything. Or they will, again, place the property on the market. When it sells, again, you're selling those shares of stock. Then those proceeds can go to the beneficiary. Okay? All right. ECNYS. All right. Now this one, bear with me. It stands for Energy Conservation Construction Code. The reason why I always have to take my time with this one is because As you can see, it's a lot of C's in there, but it's energy conservation. So as an investor, I'm never going to purchase a property. I shouldn't say never, but I don't intend to purchase a property that's already turnkey, meaning it's already in moving condition. I'm attracted to properties where I can go in and put my own style onto it. So I love to do renovations and remodeling. So with the ETC NYS, so they want to make sure that even though you were grandfathered in, once you decide that you're going to do a remodeling project or a renovation, now you have to adhere to the new codes. All right. For example, you purchase a brownstone, the electrical, plumbing, all that is grandfathered in. But once you decide to do some renovations, now they're going to make sure everything is energy efficient, from the boiler, the appliances, all those things again. And that's why it's energy conservation, right? They want you to conserve energy. And it's only a benefit for us, right? Because if I'm an investor, I would rather have LED lights, right? Where I know I don't have to worry about it. My tenants put in a request to the property management, and it lowers your energy bills, right? So it is a benefit because of the fact, as an owner, you're going to have the common charges, right? You're paying for electric in the hallways. You're paying for especially if there's a washing machine, of course, the electric, like I mentioned. So is a benefit. So it's energy conservation construction code, New York State. So basically, everything needs to be up to code. All right. Hope I explained that clearly. Express agency and implied. So express agency is written and oral. So when you become a licensed agent, you don't have to have everything in writing, even though, and I stress this, if you ever need to go to court, you need to have that in writing, right? And that writing could be formal documents, it could be on a napkin, it could be text messages. I remember winning a case against a client because the client thought, oh, I didn't sign any contracts, so I don't have to pay you. And the judge asked for my phone, right? To his surprise. So I was on People's Court, so you guys could search for that episode. And I won my case because Judge Christine Milian, shocked, asked for my phone, right? And looked at the text messages. Those text messages express agency, right? So the reason why express agency is both written and oral is because if I have a buyer and let's say they're interested in purchasing a $3 million property, but they put in an offer of $2 million, right? And then the seller counters back at 2.5, and then my client counters back at 2.6, and we're going back and forth. So going back to conservation, to save paper, it could just be verbal. It could even be an email back and forth. Because in New York, as well as parts of Jersey, especially close to Hudson County, the attorneys are going to make it official by placing it on a contract that was created by the Bar Association, okay? When you watch $1 Million Listing New York and they're over the phone or writing on a napkin, that is correct. That is correct. But eventually, everything becomes written. Why? Because again, if we ever have to go to court, you want to make sure that it's in writing. All right, so just remember that. Implied is based off actions. I'm riding my elevator. Somebody asks me what I do. I tell them I'm a broker, and they go, oh, I was interested in purchasing, right? Could you send me some listings? I'm like, okay, sure. We exchange contact information. I put them on an automatic blast after knowing what they're looking for, neighborhoods, their criteria, right? So I save it. They get automatic emails. They reach out to me and say, hey, Ramon, you know what? I think I'm interested in looking at this particular property. I go, okay, great. I set up the appointment. When we both attend the showing and we both show up and I'm talking to the broker, everybody there is going to assume that I'm representing the buyer. Now, the buyer never did an express agency. They never signed an exclusive buyer agreement, which I could have had them sign. And they never said, you're my agent. But the fact that both of us showed up to that listing together and the agent is assuming that I'm representing them, based off the actions of the client going with me to the showing, now we formed in 5 agents, okay? So because it was based off the action, so the buyer didn't have to say it, doesn't have to have anything in writing, and eventually it will transfer over to being express when the buyer says they want to place an offer, right? Because now that's going to be in writing, all right? All right, debt service. Again, this terminology, both residential and commercial, but for the most part, is mostly used in commercial real estate when we're trying to figure out cash flow. So earlier we talked about NOI, net operating income, right? So that doesn't include debt service. Once you include debt service, that's going to give us our cash flow, meaning the money that we actually get to deposit in our accounts. So debt service is just your principal and interest. So it's just pertaining to the mortgage. That's it, okay? So just remember that for the exam.